Imagine being told that the wealthiest person to ever walk the earth didn't live in Silicon Valley, didn't own oil fields, and didn't build tech empires. Imagine learning that the richest human in recorded history lived in Africa more than 7 centuries ago, and most people have never heard his story properly. His name was Mansa Musa, and when this man decided to travel, entire economies collapsed under the weight of his generosity. But the real shock isn't how much gold he had. The real shock is how his empire worked, because it operated on principles that don't fit neatly into anything we're usually taught about Africa, power, or slavery. This isn't a feel-good story. It's a complicated one, and it forces us to confront truths most history books quietly avoid. Because the Mali Empire, one of the most advanced civilizations of the medieval world, was also built on slavery. But not the kind you think. Let's rewind the clock. It's the year 1324. Across much of Europe, life is harsh and limited. Literacy is rare. Cities are small. Most people never leave the villages they're born into. Disease is blamed on curses or bad air, and higher education barely exists outside monasteries. Meanwhile, across the Sahara, a West African ruler prepares for a journey that will redefine how the world sees his continent. Mansa Musa announces his pilgrimage to Mecca. Most pilgrims travel lightly, a few companions, basic supplies. Mansa Musa travels with a moving civilization. His caravan includes tens of thousands of people. Officials, soldiers, artists, scholars, cooks, wives, advisors. Thousands of enslaved attendants dressed in silk, each carrying gold. Dozens of camels loaded with gold dust. Wherever he stops, gold flows freely. In Cairo, Musa gives away so much wealth that the value of gold crashes, not for weeks or months, but for nearly a decade. Economists would later describe it as one of the most dramatic monetary disruptions in history, all caused by one man's generosity. Europe hears about it. For the first time, mapmakers begin placing Mali prominently on world maps. A crowned African king holding gold appears in European illustrations. Stories spread. Legends grow, but those outsiders misunderstood what they were seeing. They saw wealth. They saw power. They missed the system that made it possible. So how did Mali become so rich? Gold alone wasn't the secret. The real engine of the empire was people captured, evaluated, trained, and integrated. And yes, many of them were slaves. But before you recoil, pause for a moment, because Mali's form of slavery doesn't resemble the one most of us imagine. When modern audiences hear slavery, we think of the transatlantic trade. Chains, plantations, racial hierarchy, lifelong dehumanization. That system was brutal, absolute, and deliberately designed to erase all social mobility. Mali's system was different, still unjust, still coercive, but fundamentally structured around potential. Picture this. You are a skilled warrior in a small neighboring kingdom. Brave, disciplined, respected, but poor. Your weapons are outdated. Your resources are limited. Survival is uncertain. Mali's army arrives. They are organized, well-equipped, tactically advanced. Your forces are defeated. You're captured. In many empires, this would be the end of your story, forced labor, punishment, or death. In Mali, it might be the beginning of a new one. Captured warriors weren't all treated equally. Mali actively assessed talent. Military scouts and commanders identified leadership ability, intelligence, discipline, and loyalty potential. If you demonstrated value, you weren't discarded. You were trained, given better weapons, military education, responsibility, opportunity. Some enslaved captives rose faster than freeborn Mali citizens. Some commanded troops. Some governed provinces. Some accumulated wealth that rivaled kings elsewhere. This wasn't kindness. It was strategy. Mali transformed slavery into a system of recruitment. And it worked, because Mali was always expanding. Each conquest brought new people, linguists, traders, engineers, artisans, scholars. Instead of suppressing that knowledge, Mali absorbed it. A captured merchant didn't rot in a labor camp. He helped manage trans-Saharan trade. A captured diplomat didn't disappear. She negotiated alliances. A captured scholar didn't lose his voice. He added to Mali's intellectual life. Slavery in Mali wasn't primarily about extracting labor. It was about acquiring human capital. That's why Mali controlled trade routes that linked gold from the south to salt from the north, ivory to spices, Africa to the Mediterranean world. Everything passed through Mali and everything was taxed. By the 14th century, Mali covered millions of square kilometers, larger than many modern nations. Its cities rivaled the greatest urban centers on earth. Timbuktu became legendary, not as a myth, but as a real center of scholarship, law, astronomy, medicine, and literature. Libraries held vast manuscript collections. Universities attracted students from across Africa and beyond. Many of the scholars who helped build this legacy were once captives. Socially, Mali defied expectations. Status wasn't fixed purely by birth. Slaves existed at every layer of society. There were household servants, agricultural and industrial laborers. But there was also an elite class of administrative and military slaves who wielded enormous authority. Some slaves owned property. Some owned other slaves. Some governed territories on behalf of the emperor. Legal status and real power didn't always align. Even women, particularly enslaved women, could rise to extraordinary influence. In Mali culture, the mother of the emperor held immense political authority. Oral traditions recount that some queen mothers began their lives as war captives. These stories weren't scandals. They were accepted possibilities. It suggests a society rigid in hierarchy, yet unusually fluid in mobility, especially compared to other medieval systems. Religion played a major role too. Mali was an Islamic empire, but its Islam blended local traditions with Islamic law. Slavery existed within religious boundaries. Enslaved Muslims had rights, paths toward improved status, and eventual freedom. Non-Muslim captives who converted often saw their circumstances improve dramatically. Conversion wasn't forced, it was incentivized. Over time, this contributed to the spread of Islam across West Africa through practical advantage rather than coercion. Then everything changed. When European traders arrived on the coast, they didn't want integration. They wanted bodies. The transatlantic slave trade dismantled Mali's system entirely. Instead of investing in human capability, societies were pushed toward exporting people as expendable cargo. There was no advancement, no mobility, no future. Profit replaced complexity. And once that system took root, Mali's social model collapsed along with its power. So why isn't this story widely taught? Because it disrupts simple narratives. It complicates ideas about who enslaved whom, how power functions, and whether slavery has always looked the same. It forces us to acknowledge African agency, both creative and destructive, rather than portraying Africa solely as a passive victim. And complexity makes people uncomfortable. But here's the truth. The Mali Empire wasn't perfect. It wasn't moral by modern standards. It was a society filled with brilliance, brutality, opportunity, and injustice, all at once. And that's precisely why it matters. Because history isn't clean. It's human. Understanding Mali doesn't excuse slavery. It exposes how systems are choices, not inevitabilities. And if systems are chosen, they can be unchosen. That's the buried lesson of Mali. An empire powerful enough to bend economies, smart enough to run a continent, and complex enough to turn bondage into influence. That is the story most people never hear. And now you have